The throne room of the Valorian Empire stretched for nearly a mile. Golden pillars rose toward a ceiling painted with the images of conquered worlds. Thousands of them, each one represented a species that had bent its knee to Valorian rule. Emperor Calith the Undying sat upon the golden throne, his pale blue skin glowing under the lights of 100 floating orbs. He had ruled for 600 years. His father had ruled for 800 before him. The Valorian Empire had existed for 12,000 years, and in all that time, they had never lost a war. They had forgotten what losing felt like. Admiral Tyrek Voss stood at the base of the throne, his military uniform covered in medals from a dozen campaigns. He held a data tablet in his four-fingered hand and smiled with confidence. "My Emperor," he said, "our scouts have completed their survey of the Outer Rim. We have found a new species. They call themselves humans, and they come from a world called Earth." A murmur passed through the assembled court. New species meant new conquest. New conquest meant new glory. Emperor Calith leaned forward slightly. "Tell me about these humans. They are weak, my Emperor. They have only been traveling among the stars for 300 of their years. They control 47 systems. Their military is small. Their technology is primitive compared to ours." Tyrek Voss laughed softly. "They will fall within a single cycle." High Priestess Shaylin stepped forward. She wore robes of deep purple, and her eyes held the cold certainty of faith. "The gods smile upon expansion," she declared. "It is our sacred duty to bring order to the chaos of the galaxy. These humans must be shown their place." The court nodded in agreement. This was how it always went. The Valorians found a species, they conquered it, and they moved on to the next. It was the natural order of things, but one voice spoke against the tide. Ambassador Quellen walked forward from the shadows. He was old by Valorian standards. His blue skin faded to gray in places. He had spent his life studying other species, learning their ways, and understanding their minds. He had been among the first to make contact with the humans, and what he had seen troubled him deeply. "My Emperor," Quellen said, his voice calm but firm, "I would advise caution." Quote, Tyrek Voss turned to look at him with annoyance. "Caution? Against a species with 47 systems? We have 10 million warships, Ambassador. What could they possibly do to us?" "I have walked among the humans," Quellen replied. "I have studied their history. They are not like the others we have conquered." Emperor Calith raised one hand slightly. The court fell silent. "Explain yourself, Ambassador." Quellen took a breath. "Their history is unlike anything I have ever encountered. They have spent most of their existence fighting each other. War after war after war, stretching back to the very beginning of their civilization. They have developed weapons capable of destroying their entire world, and they came close to using them more than once. This proves they are primitive and self-destructive," Shaylin said dismissively. "They will crumble before our might." "No," Quellen said. "It proves they are survivors. Every time they faced destruction, they found a way through. They adapt. They endure. And they possess a quality that my translators struggle to express. The closest word would be spite." Tyrek Voss frowned. "Spite? When a human is pushed into a corner, when they face an enemy they cannot defeat, they do not surrender. They do not run. They fight harder. They will destroy themselves just to take their enemy with them. I have seen records of human soldiers charging into certain death, not because they believed they could win, but because they refused to lose, alone." The court was quiet for a moment, then Emperor Calith laughed. "You are afraid of a species that throws tantrums when it loses?" He shook his head. "Ambassador, your caution has served us well in the past. But this time, you worry over nothing. These humans control 47 systems. We control 40,000. Their fleet is a handful of ships, ours is an ocean. There is no scenario in which they can threaten us." "My Emperor," Quellen tried again, "I am not saying they can defeat us. I am saying that the cost of this war may be higher than we expect. The humans will not surrender quietly. They will make us pay for every world we take." Tyrek Voss stepped forward. Then we will make them pay first. A swift strike, overwhelming force. They will be conquered before they even understand what is happening. Shalon nodded. The gods have chosen us to rule the galaxy. Who are these humans to stand against divine will? Emperor Calith looked down at Quellen with something close to pity. Your concerns are noted, Ambassador. But the decision is made. Admiral Voss, you will take the Third Armada and bring these humans into the fold. I expect a full conquest within one standard cycle. Tyrek Voss bowed deeply. It will be done, my Emperor. I will bring you Earth itself as a trophy. Quellen said nothing more. He had done what he could. He had warned them. But 12,000 years of victory had made the Valorians blind. They could not imagine a future where they did not win. As the court celebrated the coming conquest, Quellen walked alone through the palace gardens. The night sky above was filled with stars, each one representing a system under Valorian control. He thought about the humans he had met. They had been friendly, curious, and eager to learn. But beneath that friendliness, he had sensed something else. A hardness, a readiness for violence that they kept carefully hidden. He remembered one human, a military officer named Daniel Reyes. They had shared a meal together during the diplomatic mission. Reyes had smiled and laughed and told stories about his family. But when Quellen had asked what humans would do if someone attacked their worlds, the smile had vanished. We would fight, Reyes had said simply. Until there was nothing left of us, or nothing left of them. Quellen had asked which outcome was more likely. Reyes had just smiled again, but the warmth was gone from his eyes. That would depend on who attacked us. Now, standing in the garden, Quellen looked up at the stars and whispered to himself, You should have listened to me. You should have left them alone. But the Third Armada was already being assembled. 10,000 warships, crewed by millions of Valorian soldiers, armed with weapons that had crushed 100 species before. They would jump into human space within the week. And the humans were waiting. Far across the galaxy, on the bridge of a patrol ship called the TSS Defiant, Captain Daniel Reyes received a coded transmission from Terran Command. He read it twice, then looked up at his tactical officer, Lieutenant Commander Laura Mitchell. They're coming, he said quietly. Mitchell's jaw tightened. How many? 10,000 ships, maybe more. She was silent for a moment. Then she looked at him with steady eyes. What are our orders? Reyes stared out at the stars. Somewhere out there, an empire that had never known defeat was preparing to crush his people. They thought it would be easy. They thought humanity would break. They were wrong. Our orders are to survive long enough for Protocol Raven to activate, he said, and then we show them what happens when you touch our worlds. The stars were quiet, but not for long. The sky above New Cascadia burned orange and red as the Valorian ships descended. They came without warning, without any declaration of war. One moment the colony world was peaceful, its 3 million people going about their daily lives. The next moment, fire fell from the heavens. Captain Daniel Reyes watched from the bridge of the TSS Defiant as the first cities died. His hands gripped the armrest of his chair so hard that his knuckles turned white. Beside him, Lieutenant Commander Laura Mitchell tracked the enemy fleet on her display. Her voice was steady, but her eyes showed the same horror that Reyes felt. 1,800 enemy vessels in orbit, she reported. They're hitting civilian centers. No military targets. They're sending a message, Reyes said quietly. Break our spirit before we can fight back. On the surface below, millions of people ran through the streets. Buildings collapsed. Families were torn apart. The Valorians made no attempt to minimize casualties. Why would they? To them, humans were just another species to be conquered. Their lives meant nothing. A transmission crackled across all channels. The face of Admiral Tyrek Voss appeared on every screen, every device, every display on the planet. People of the Terran species, he announced with cold satisfaction. Your time as an independent civilization has ended. The Valorian Empire claims your worlds, your resources, and your service. Surrender now, and you will be allowed to live as subjects of the Empire. Resist, and you will be destroyed. You have one standard day to respond. The transmission ended. Across New Cascadia, survivors crawled from the wreckage of their homes and stared at the sky with disbelief. Everything they had built was burning, but not everyone ran. Not everyone hid. Sergeant Kevin Drake pulled himself out of a collapsed building, blood running down his face from a cut on his forehead. He had been a Marine for 15 years, stationed on New Cascadia as part of the Planetary Defense Force. Now that force was scattered, its command structure shattered by the opening bombardment. Drake looked around at the destruction. He saw people crying, people screaming, people dying in the streets. He saw Valorian dropships landing in the distance, deploying soldiers to occupy the ruins. Something cold settled in his chest. Not fear. Something deeper. Something older. He found his rifle in the rubble. He checked that it still worked. Then, he started walking toward the forest at the edge of the city. Other survivors saw him and followed. By the time he reached the tree line, he had 30 people behind him. Soldiers, civilians, even a few teenagers who refused to leave their families. Drake looked at them. "The fleet is gone," he said bluntly. "The government is gone. But we're still here. And as long as we're breathing, we fight. Anyone who wants to survive, follow me. Anyone who wants to make them pay for what they did today, follow me faster." They disappeared into the wilderness. The Valorian occupation forces would soon learn that conquering New Cascadia was only the beginning. Holding it would be another matter entirely. Far from the burning colony, on Earth itself, Admiral Nathan Cole sat in the command center of Terran Defense Command. He was 63 years old, with gray hair and tired eyes that had seen too many wars. But those eyes were sharp now, focused on the holographic display showing the invasion. Around him, politicians argued. Some demanded immediate surrender to save lives, others called for negotiations. A few simply stared at the screens with blank faces, unable to process what was happening. Cole let them talk. He had heard it all before. Finally, one of the council members turned to him. "Admiral, what do you suggest? They have 10,000 ships. We have perhaps 200 that could respond in time. This is hopeless." Cole stood slowly. The room fell silent. 200 years ago, he said, humanity discovered it was not alone in the universe. We found the ruins of alien civilizations that had risen and fallen long before we learned to make fire. We studied them. We learned from their mistakes. And we came to one conclusion. He looked around the room. The galaxy is dangerous. The galaxy is cruel. And the only way to survive in such a galaxy is to be ready for anything. He pressed a button on his console. Protocol Raven is now active. Across human space, things began to change. On a moon orbiting Jupiter, a mountain split open to reveal a shipyard that had been hidden for a century. Inside, 300 warships sat waiting, their reactors cold but ready. In the asteroid belt, weapons caches unlocked. Missiles, weapons platforms, and automated defense systems that had been dormant for decades came online. Near the outer colonies, sleeper fleets awoke. Ships that the rest of the galaxy had never seen, built in secret, crewed by soldiers who had trained their entire lives for this moment. The Valorians thought they knew the size of the Terran military. They were wrong. Lieutenant Commander Laura Mitchell stared at her display as new signals appeared across the system. "Captain," she said, her voice filled with wonder. "I'm reading over 2,000 new contacts. They're ours." Reyes allowed himself a small smile. Terran Command knew this day would come. They've been preparing for it since first contact. Why hide our true strength? Because the best weapon is the one your enemy doesn't know exists. Reyes stood. "Signal the fleet. Tell them we're still in the fight. And tell them to make the Valorians remember this day for the rest of their short history." Back on New Cascadia, the Valorian occupation continued. Soldiers moved through the destroyed cities, rounding up survivors, establishing control points. They expected fear. They expected submission. Instead, they found empty streets and silence. That night, A Valorian patrol disappeared in the northern sector. All 12 soldiers were found the next morning, dead. Their weapons were gone. A message was carved into a nearby wall in the Valorian language. It said simply, "We do not forgive." The commander of the occupation forces read the report with disbelief. No conquered species had ever resisted like this. Certainly not within hours of the invasion. He ordered more patrols, more soldiers, more firepower. It did not help. The humans struck from the shadows, from the forests, from the ruins of their own cities. They used weapons they had hidden. They made new weapons from scrap and debris. They fought with a fury that the Valorians could not understand. Sergeant Kevin Drake led his growing band of survivors deeper into the wilderness. They established hidden camps. They gathered supplies. They rescued other survivors and taught them how to fight. One night, sitting around a small fire, one of his people asked him how long they could keep this up. Drake stared into the flames. "As long as it takes," he said. "They burned our cities. They killed our families. They think they can break us." He looked up at the stars, where Valorian ships still orbited. They have no idea what they started. Far away, Admiral Tyrek Voss received his first casualty reports. They were small numbers, barely worth noticing compared to the size of his force. But something about them troubled him. The humans should have been broken by now. The other species always broke by this point. But these humans kept fighting, kept resisting, kept dying rather than surrender. He dismissed his concerns. It did not matter. A few guerrilla fighters could not stop an empire. The real war would be decided in space. And there, the Valorians were unstoppable. Or so he believed. In the depths of human space, the true Terran fleet continued to gather. Thousands of ships, crewed by millions of soldiers, armed with weapons that had been designed for exactly this moment. Admiral Nathan Cole looked at the assembling force and felt something he had not felt in years: hope. They wanted a war, he said quietly. Now they have one. Admiral Tyrek Voss stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Divine Conquest, and watched his fleet advance deeper into human space. Behind him lay conquered worlds. Ahead lay more easy victories, or so he believed. The humans had surprised him with their resistance on the ground, but that was a minor annoyance. The real power of any civilization was its fleet, and the Terran fleet was nothing compared to his armada. Then they reached the Kepler system. The Valorian vanguard jumped in first, 500 ships, expecting to find a small human defense force. Instead, they found Commodore Scott Hayes and the 2nd Terran Battle Group. Hayes was a large man with a calm voice and steady hands. He sat in the command chair of his flagship, the TSS Ironclad, and watched the enemy ships appear on his display. His tactical officer reported the numbers. 500 Valorian warships. He had 120. "Sir," his communications officer said, "the Valorians are demanding our surrender." Hayes smiled slightly. "Tell them no." The battle began. The Valorians attacked with confidence. They had superior numbers, superior technology, and centuries of experience crushing lesser species. They expected the humans to fight briefly and then flee. The humans did not flee. The TSS Valor, a heavy cruiser under Commander Megan Torres, took the first hits. Her ship was struck by multiple missiles, crippling her engines and killing half her crew. By all logic, she should have retreated. Any other species would have retreated. Torres looked at the Valorian dreadnought bearing down on her. She looked at the damage reports showing her ship was dying. Then she gave an order that no Valorian commander would ever have expected. "All hands, abandon ship. Helm, set collision course for that dreadnought. Engineering, prepare reactor overload." Her surviving crew escaped in pods. Torres stayed at the helm. The TSS Valor, burning and broken, accelerated toward the enemy ship. The Valorians tried to destroy her, but it was too late. The Valor struck the dreadnought amidships. A moment later, her reactor exploded. Both ships vanished in a ball of fire. Across the battlefield, similar scenes played out. Human pilots ejected from their dying fighters, then manually guided missiles into enemy ships. A destroyer captain rammed his vessel into a Valorian carrier rather than let it escape. Soldiers in damaged boarding pods continued their attacks even as they died. The Valorians had never seen anything like it. Commodore Hayes pushed his advantage. His ships weaved through the enemy formation, striking weak points, exploiting confusion. Lieutenant Commander Laura Mitchell, now serving as tactical advisor to the battle group, coordinated maneuvers that split the Valorian fleet into isolated clusters. After 6 hours, the vanguard was destroyed. 300 Valorian ships were gone. The humans had lost 60, but many of those losses had taken enemies with them. Admiral Tyrek Voss received the report in stunned silence. "How is this possible?" he demanded. They were outnumbered 4-1. His officers had no answer. They had fought 100 species. None of them had ever fought like this. On the Valorian homeworld, Ambassador Quellen watched the same reports with a heavy heart. He had warned them. He had told them what humans were. But the Empire had not listened. Now they were learning. Dr. Amy Vasquez, a xenobiologist attached to Terran military intelligence, stood before the Terran Council and explained what was happening. She was a small woman with dark hair and glasses, but her voice was strong. "The Valorians do not understand us," she said. "They cannot understand us. Their empire was built on the assumption that all species will act rationally when faced with superior force. They conquer through intimidation. Most species see a larger enemy and calculate the odds. If the odds are against them, they surrender." She paused. "Humans do not calculate odds the same way. Our ancestors evolved as persistence predators. We chased prey across entire continents. Not because we were faster or stronger, but because we simply did not stop. That instinct is still inside us. When we are threatened, we do not think about survival. We think about winning, no matter the cost." Admiral Nathan Cole nodded slowly. "And the cost to the enemy." "Exactly. The Valorians see our willingness to die as madness. They do not realize it is strategy. Every ship we sacrifice takes enemy ships with it. Every soldier who dies fighting costs them soldiers to kill. We are not trying to survive this war, Admiral. We are trying to make it so expensive that the Valorians cannot afford to win." The Council absorbed this in silence. It was a grim truth, but it was the truth. On occupied New Cascadia, Sergeant Kevin Drake continued his guerrilla campaign. His group had grown to over 1,000 fighters now, scattered across the planet in hidden cells. They struck every night, hitting supply convoys, assassinating officers, and destroying equipment. The Valorians responded with crackdowns. They rounded up civilians and threatened them with death if the resistance did not surrender. Drake watched from the hills as they executed a group of prisoners in the town square. One of his people, a young woman named Grace, turned to him with tears in her eyes. "We have to stop. They're killing innocent people because of us." Drake's face was hard. "They were killing innocent people before we started fighting. They'll keep killing innocent people after they think they've won. The only thing that changes when we surrender is that we stop making them pay for it." He looked at the Valorian soldiers below. "Every one of them we kill is one less that can hurt our people. Every officer we remove is one less giving orders. We cannot save everyone, but we can make them afraid. And afraid enemies make mistakes." That night, the resistance attacked the Valorian headquarters in the capital city. They killed the garrison commander and 3 of his senior officers. They wrote another message on the walls: "We do not forgive. We do not forget. We do not stop." The new commander who took over requested evacuation. His request was denied. There were not enough ships to spare. In space, Admiral Tyrek Voss regrouped his fleet and prepared for another push. He had lost thousands of ships, but he still had thousands more. The humans could not keep fighting forever, but something had changed. His crews were nervous. They had seen the battle reports, watched recordings of human ships ramming dreadnoughts, heard stories of soldiers who smiled while dying. For the first time in 12,000 years, Valorian soldiers were afraid of their enemy. Tyrek Voss called a meeting of his senior officers. "This changes nothing," he declared. The humans are desperate. Desperate enemies take risks. It does not mean they can win. But even as he spoke, he remembered Ambassador Quellen's warning about human spite. He had dismissed it as weakness. Now he was beginning to understand what it truly meant. The humans did not want to win. They wanted the Valorians to lose. They were willing to burn alongside their enemy as long as the flames consumed them both. It was not madness. It was something far more terrifying. It was strategy. And as the war continued, as both sides bled and burned, a simple truth began to emerge. The Valorian Empire had conquered 100 species by making them believe resistance was hopeless. Humanity had never believed that. Not once in their entire bloody history, and they never would. 6 months had passed since the invasion began. 6 months of blood and fire and death. The Valorians had expected victory within weeks. Instead, they found themselves fighting for every system, every planet, every mile of space. And now, the tide was turning. Admiral Nathan Cole stood on the bridge of the TSS Vengeance, the new flagship of the United Terran fleet. Around him stretched the largest human armada ever assembled, 3,000 warships, gathered from hidden shipyards and secret bases across the outer colonies. This was the force that humanity had kept in reserve, the weapon that no one outside Terran Command had known existed. Today, they would use it. Operation Retribution begins now, Cole announced. His voice was carried across every ship in the fleet. For 6 months, they have burned our worlds and murdered our people. Today, we return the favor. Today, we take the war to them. The fleet jumped. They emerged in Valorian space, far behind the enemy lines. Before them lay a massive shipyard complex, one of the largest in the Empire. It had been producing warships for centuries, feeding the endless hunger of Valorian conquest. It died in minutes. Human ships swarmed the complex, destroying defensive platforms and slaughtering the small garrison fleet. Strike teams boarded the main station, planting charges in critical systems. Commander Ryan Park led the assault, his soldiers cutting through surprised Valorian defenders. "Demo charges set," he reported. "We're pulling out." The shipyard exploded. Years of construction, thousands of ships in various stages of completion, all gone in a single flash of light. This was just the beginning. Across Valorian territory, similar strikes took place. Human special forces appeared where they should not be, striking without warning and vanishing before retaliation could arrive. Supply convoys were ambushed, communication relays were destroyed, fuel depots burned. The Valorians had built their empire on the assumption that war would always be fought on someone else's territory. Now war had come to their doorstep, and they did not know how to respond. Admiral Tyrek Voss received report after report of disasters. His supply lines were crumbling. His reinforcements were being intercepted. His fleet, which had seemed invincible 6 months ago, was now cut off and running low on everything. He sent an urgent message to Emperor Caliph. "We need the Grand Fleet. The humans are stronger than we anticipated." The Emperor's response came within hours. The Imperial Grand Fleet, the largest military force in Valorian history, was being mobilized. 50,000 warships would jump to the Helios system, where they would crush the human rebellion once and for all. The Valorians were committing everything they had. Humanity learned of this through intercepted communications and prepared accordingly. Admiral Cole studied the intelligence reports and made a decision. They would meet the Grand Fleet at Helios. They would fight with everything they had. Win or lose, it would be decided there. Captain Daniel Reyes stood on the bridge of the TSS Defiant as the ship jumped to the Helios system. 6 months ago, he had watched New Cascadia burn. He had lost friends, crewmates, and very nearly his faith in humanity's ability to survive. Now he was about to fight in the largest battle in human history. "All hands, battle stations," he announced. "This is it. Everything we've done, everything we've sacrificed, comes down to this." Lieutenant Commander Laura Mitchell looked up from her tactical display. "Sir? I'm reading over 40,000 enemy contacts. They outnumber us nearly 10 to 1. Reyes nodded slowly. "Then we'll have to fight 10 times harder." The Imperial Grand Fleet arrived in a wave of light and fury. 50,000 warships, crewed by millions of Valorian soldiers, armed with the most powerful weapons in the galaxy. They expected the humans to flee at the sight of such overwhelming force. The humans did not flee. They attacked. The TSS Defiant led a squadron of destroyers straight into the heart of the enemy formation. Mitchell coordinated their movements with precise skill, weaving between the larger ships and striking at weak points. Other squadrons did the same, breaking the Valorian lines into chaos. Commodore Scott Hayes commanded the main battle line from the TSS Ironclad. His ships traded fire with Valorian dreadnoughts, taking terrible losses but giving as good as they got. A Valorian missile struck the Ironclad's bridge, killing Hayes instantly. His executive officer took command without hesitation. The ship kept fighting. For 3 days, the battle raged. Ships died by the hundreds on both sides. The darkness of space filled with debris and bodies, and the flash of weapons fire. Admiral Tyrek Voss watched from his flagship as his fleet was torn apart. The humans were everywhere, striking from all angles, refusing to stay down no matter how many losses they took. His officers reported morale collapsing across the fleet. Crews were refusing orders. Some ships were trying to retreat. "Hold the line," he screamed. "We have superior numbers. We cannot lose to these primitives." But they were losing. The humans had turned the battle into a brutal slugfest where courage and determination mattered more than numbers. And in that kind of fight, humanity had no equal. On the third day, a Terran strike force broke through to the Valorian command ship. Captain Daniel Reyes led the assault, his squadron of destroyers clearing a path through the defenders. "Target their bridge," Mitchell said. "One good hit and we can end this." The TSS Defiant fired everything it had. The Valorian flagship shuddered under the impact. Secondary explosions rippled along its hull. Admiral Tyrek Voss died when his bridge collapsed around him. He had never understood humanity. He never would. With their commander dead and their fleet in chaos, the Valorians broke. Ships jumped away in panic, fleeing in every direction. The survivors scattered to the far corners of the galaxy. The Imperial Grand Fleet, pride of the Valorian Empire, ceased to exist. On the Valorian homeworld, Emperor Calith received the news in his throne room. For the first time in his 600 years of life, he felt something he did not recognize: fear. High Priestess Shaylan fell to her knees. "The gods have abandoned us," she whispered. "We are being punished for our sins." Ambassador Quellen said nothing. He simply stood in the shadows and watched the empire he had served, his entire life, begin to crumble. On occupied New Cascadia, Sergeant Kevin Drake watched Valorian forces begin their evacuation. They were pulling out, abandoning the planet to save their remaining ships. One of his fighters cheered. "We won. It's over." Drake shook his head slowly. "No, it's not over. Not until they pay for everything they did." He looked up at the sky, where human ships were now appearing in orbit. The liberation had begun. But liberation was only the first step. Admiral Nathan Cole addressed his fleet after the battle. His face was tired, his eyes heavy with the weight of everyone they had lost. But his voice was strong. "They came to our space and burned our worlds," he said. "They thought we would break. They were wrong. Now we will show them what it means to face humanity. Not our anger. Not our hate. Our justice." The fleet began moving toward Valorian space. The tide had turned, and it would not stop until it washed over everything the Empire had built. The Valorian Empire, which had ruled for 12,000 years, fell in 3 months. After the destruction of the Grand Fleet at Helios, Emperor Calith sent envoys to negotiate peace. He offered territory, resources, and reparations. He was willing to give humanity anything they wanted if they would simply stop. Admiral Nathan Cole received the envoys on his flagship. He listened to their offers in silence. When they finished, he spoke one word: "No." The lead envoy was confused. "No? But we are offering you everything you could want. The war is over. You have won." Cole leaned forward. "The war is over when we say it is over. You came to our space uninvited. You killed millions of our people. You burned our cities and thought you could walk away by offering money and land." He shook his head. That is not how this works. That is not how humanity works. The envoys were sent back with the same message. There would be no treaty, no negotiation, no forgiveness. The Valorians had started this war. Humanity would finish it. The Terran fleet advanced into enemy territory. One by one, the outer colonies of the Valorian Empire fell. But the humans did not destroy them. They liberated them. For 12,000 years, the Valorians had conquered species after species, forcing them into servitude. Now, humanity was setting them free. Captain Daniel Reyes led the task force that liberated the Korath homeworld. The Korath were a reptilian species that had been enslaved for 8 centuries. When Reyes landed on their planet, their leaders came to meet him with fear in their eyes. "Are you here to conquer us?" the Korath elder asked. "To take the Valorians' place?" Reyes shook his head. "We're here to give you a choice. You can join us, or you can go your own way. Either way, you're free now." The elder stared at him for a long moment. "No species has ever offered us freedom. What do you want in return?" "Nothing. Except for you to remember this day. Remember that humanity helped you when we could have ignored you. And if anyone ever threatens your people again, remember that you can call on us for help." The Korath elder bowed his head. "We will remember." Similar scenes played out across dozens of worlds. Humanity armed the liberated species, trained them, helped them rebuild. They asked only one thing in return: remember. The Valorian Empire was crumbling from the inside. Species that had been loyal subjects for millennia now rose up against their masters. The military that had seemed invincible was now spread too thin to maintain control. One by one, systems declared independence. High Priestess Shaylin could not accept the fall of everything she believed in. She climbed to the top of the great temple and threw herself from its highest balcony. Her last words were a prayer to gods who had stopped listening. The remaining military leaders tried to organize a final defense of the homeworld. But their soldiers had lost the will to fight. They had seen the reports from the front. They knew what human warriors were capable of. Most simply laid down their weapons and waited for the end. Captain Daniel Reyes led the assault on Valoria Prime itself. The TSS Defiant was at the front of the formation when they entered orbit. Lieutenant Commander Laura Mitchell stood beside him on the bridge, watching the homeworld of their enemies fill the view screen. "It's beautiful," she said quietly. "Hard to believe so much evil came from such a pretty world." Reyes nodded. "Evil can come from anywhere. So can good. What matters is the choices we make." The final battle was short. The few Valorian ships that tried to resist were destroyed. The planetary defenses fell within hours. Human soldiers landed on the surface and advanced toward the Golden Palace. Emperor Calith, the Undying, sat on his throne and watched them come. His guards had fled. His advisors had abandoned him. He was alone in the Great Hall where his ancestors had ruled for thousands of years. When the human soldiers entered, he did not try to run. He simply sat and waited. A young officer approached him. "Emperor Calith, you are under arrest for crimes against the Terran people. You will face trial for your actions." Calith looked at the human with tired eyes. "I have ruled for 600 years. I have conquered 100 species, and I am brought down by creatures who have barely learned to leave their own planet." He laughed bitterly. "How is this possible? How is this possible?" The officer did not answer. He simply stepped aside as more soldiers entered the chamber. Among them was Ambassador Quellen. The old Valorian walked slowly toward the throne. He looked at his emperor, the being he had served his entire life, and felt nothing but sadness. "You should have listened to me," he said. "I warned you what the humans were. I told you to leave them alone." Calith's face twisted with anger. "You dare lecture me? I am the Emperor. I am the voice of the gods." "The gods are silent," Quellen replied. "They have been silent for a very long time. We were not chosen to rule the galaxy. We simply had more ships and more soldiers. When we met a species that would not break, our empire broke instead." He turned and walked away. He did not look back. Admiral Nathan Cole arrived on Valoria Prime the next day. He stood in the throne room and looked at the golden seat where emperors had sat for 12,000 years. Then he turned to face the assembled representatives of the liberated species. "The Valorian Empire is finished," he announced. "Its leaders will face justice for their crimes. Its military will be disbanded. Its colonies will be given the choice to govern themselves." He paused. "But this is not about revenge. This is about ensuring that what happened to us, what happened to all of you, never happens again. The galaxy must learn that conquest has a price, that there are species who will not kneel, no matter the cost." The representatives nodded. They had seen what humanity could do. They would not forget. 1 week later, Ambassador Quellen was brought before the Terran Council. He expected execution. Instead, Admiral Cole spoke to him directly. "You warned them," Cole said. "You were the only one who spoke against the invasion. For that, you will live." Quellen was surprised. "What would you have me do?" "Carry a message. Travel the galaxy. Tell every species, every empire, every federation what happened here. Tell them why the Valorian Empire fell. And tell them this." Cole leaned forward. "Terran space is forbidden. Do not go there. Do not threaten them. Do not test them. We are not cruel. We are not evil. But we do not forget. And we do not stop. Leave us in peace, or we will teach you what peace truly costs." Quellen spent the rest of his long life doing exactly that. He traveled from world to world, telling the story of the war. He showed recordings of the battles, of human ships ramming enemy dreadnoughts, of soldiers fighting to the last breath. He explained what spite meant, and why it made humanity the most dangerous species in the galaxy. Other empires listened. They looked at the ruins of the Valorian civilization and learned the lesson it had paid so dearly to teach. Centuries passed. Wars were fought across the stars. Empires rose and fell, but no one entered Terran space uninvited. Warning beacons floated at every approach, broadcasting Quellen's message in 1,000 languages. Captain Daniel Reyes retired eventually. He married Laura Mitchell and had 3 children. He lived to see humanity become one of the most respected powers in the galaxy, not through conquest, but through the simple fact that no one wanted to fight them. Sergeant Kevin Drake became a hero on New Cascadia. They built a statue of him in the capital city, standing with his rifle, looking toward the stars. The inscription read simply, "We did not forget." And in the depths of space, on 1,000 different worlds, beings of every shape and size taught their children the same lesson. There are some species you do not threaten, some territories you do not enter, some enemies you do not make. Terran space is forbidden. Leave the humans alone. They learned that lesson from an empire that ruled for 12,000 years and lost everything to its hubris. It was a lesson the galaxy would never forget.